30 years from now, I think our children are going to be the kind of fathers that we are prescribing today. I think that our sons are going to grow up assuming, as young men are today, assuming that their wives are going to work, are going to assume that their wives are going to be as equally committed to their careers as they are going to assume that if they're going to have families, they're going to have families where they are going to be equal partners. I'll give you one example of how I think this is going to look, how this is going to look. 20 years ago, when I started teaching about these sorts of issues, I would ask my students, what are you going to do to balance work and family if you get married, if you're straight, if you get married, if you have children? The women would say, 20 years ago, the women would say, we're going to love each other. It's going to work out. And the men would say, huh? Like the question didn't even register for them. Now, I ask my students, what are you going to do to balance work and family? The women say, well, first, I'm going to have my first kid, but I'm only going to take 4 months off because I want to get right back to work because I really want to keep my career going. But then when I have my second kid, that's when I'm going to take 5 years off because I really want to be there for both the kids when they're developing. And then I'm going to go back to my work because I'll have already made it, possible for my career trajectory for me to come right back. So the women have it all planned out. The men, they say, we're going to love each other. It's going to work out. What I get from this is two things. The men are where the women were 20 years ago, but the question now makes sense to them. The question is meaningful. They know that they have to start thinking about this. They've started where the women started, but they're going to think about it a lot differently. I think that's the trajectory that we're looking at. I think kids today are assuming the kind of things that we had to fight for, just as we assumed the kind of things that our mothers and fathers had to fight for. My grandparents had to fight for the women's right to vote, to serve on juries. Women take that for granted. My mother's generation had to fight for the right to go to law school, to go to medical school, to become journalists. They assume that. This generation, we're fighting for the right of men to be equal parents and still feel like real men. Our children are going to take that for granted.